be with you in a slightly different capacity this morning, but it's nonetheless very pleasant. As I read newspapers these days and listen to as little TV and radio as I can, I'm a bit troubled because there seems to be today much in human nature that begins to create in me, at least in some others, some doubt as to the integrity of human nature. I look for goodness, for example, in the printed word, and sometimes it's hard to find, and I would suggest that goodness may be among those many endangered species, if you will. And some of us have concluded that goodness is simply a sentimental illusion, or even my colleagues in psychology argue that goodness is really nothing but an indirect exercise in self-interest. Uncertain, undependable, certainly. When the chips are really down, where does one find human goodness? Well, despite its elusiveness, goodness does indeed touch the lives of all of us. And in the most bleak historical epochs, there are always people who step forward, and their deeds and their goodness truly inspires us. Goodness, I think, is, even though we may think it's waning, goodness is an undeniable fact and a mainstay, I think, of human existence. But these are difficult times, I admit. For some, it does appear to be kind of bleak, and even contemporary historians are telling us that our own era is a minor dark age. In a book published some years ago, in answering why it may be a minor dark age, Robert Bella and his colleagues wrote a beautiful book called The Habits of the Heart, and in the book, Bella and his colleagues argued that it was unbridled individualism that has grown to rather epidemic proportions today. That such individualism cuts us off from responsibility to and responsibility for others. Responsibility for the common good, if you will. Such narcissism and me-first attitudes, they argue, cut us off from sources of deeper meaning in our lives. And this culture of separation, they even blame the university for enhancing this culture of separation. And we reach the point where perhaps neither goodness nor people nor life itself begins to matter. Some time ago, one of my daughters in New York called me, and she just couldn't get over, for example, the great evening she spent with Dr. Henry Kissinger and his wife. Oh, she was so charming, she said, and went on and on. And I quietly reminded her that Dr. Henry Kissinger, in the minds of many, or some, he encouraged crimes against humanity. And there have been attempts to arrest him in different airports across the world. Well, I just reminded myself that's just one indication, I think, of the fact that you and I are faced with a confusing jumble of so-called celebrities. The talented and the untalented. The heroes and heroines juxtaposed with the most incredible villains. People of great accomplishment, and of course those people who have accomplished absolutely nothing. The criteria for their celebrity status, of course, is that they have their image has encapsulated some form of that obsessive North American dream to become successful and famous. We're surrounded by people who want to be admired but not respected, who want to be seen as glamorous but not particularly hard-working, people famed not for their deeds but for their images, casting their silhouettes rather than revealing some substance to their personalities. And in our society, it's remarkable how we speak so openly in terms of image. Universities, churches, corporations, even charities speak of that deep desire to create a favorable image. Even as if something as vapid as the fashion industry, where Bill Blatz recently suggested that he would be willing to license products such as chocolates and perfume, but I would never license automobile tires. That would really damage my image. In a recent political discussion with the provincial election, not too far away, I was engaged in a discussion with one student, and the student provided me with the opinion that if the current government wanted to stay in power, they should give the appearance of helping the poor. When I asked the student rather directly, why not simply assist the poor and attack poverty directly? And he replied, well, that might be preferable, but if it were done invisibly, it would not accomplish the desired end. And I thought to myself, what a cynical understanding of the importance of image. And I thought, mildly frightening, if you will. And when a society exalts such flights from reality into image, I think it sets a rather dangerous course for itself. Only a society that acknowledges, for example, power or status or fame without any sense of moral obligation will spawn celebrity monsters that we have seen in the past few years. But of course, I realize everybody wants to be somebody. And some of us have worn ourselves out trying to discover how we can become that somebody. And all the while, the more fortunate among our colleagues, they've simply worked very hard at finding out that person they already are, or that somebody they already are. But the question of who we are, of course, can haunt us for a long, long time. And some of us, sadly, never find an answer at all. When Willie Loman, the salesman in Arthur Miller's iconic American play, Death of a Salesman, when Willie was lowered into his grave, at graveside, one of his sons shook his head and said, "Poor Willie, he never knew who he was." Yes, Willie's obsession with image, social success, fame, prevented Willie from knowing who he really was. And Willie forgot that we create ourselves from the inside out, not from the outside in. And how incredibly sad for people like Willie Loman to look back after their brief walk across eternity and say sadly, but none of that was me. We even borrow from the famous, or if you will, the infamous. How often have you been startled when a friend of yours will say to you that he or she has been mobbed recently at the airport while people mistook them for some movie celebrity or TV celebrity? We borrow from the famous. And I was visiting my brother in the J.C. Penney's building many, many years ago, admittedly when I was younger. And I was going up to the 40th floor in these massive elevators that you know of. Flight deck of a 787, it's so complex. Large elevator, and over in the corner were a couple of little girls, 11 or 12. And they were eyeing me strangely, and finally one of them came across the elevator and said, "Mr. Van Dyke, could we have your autograph?" And forgive me, I was tempted to do a soft shoe. Mary Tyler Moore's on the West Coast, so she was not there to lead me through it. But forgive me, but I did put on her little pad of paper with much affection, Dick Van Dyke. And having smoked a pipe in absolutely antediluvian times, thinking I might, if I smoked a pipe, enhance my ever-shrinking professorial image, smoking a pipe, etc. I remember getting a sample of tobacco in the mail. And what I found most interesting about the sample of tobacco was the accompanying booklet. And the booklet was titled, "The Art of Pipe Smoking." And the text of the booklet claimed that lighting up a pipe, I quote, endows a man with many attributes of leadership, reliability, level-headedness. What an impressive list of desirable traits. But the illustrations accompanying the text I found most interesting. The illustration suggested that this particular pipe tobacco was sexually potent. It had aphrodisiac qualities. The booklet showed women hungrily eyeing the man as he puffs on his pipe and lights it up. And bikini-clad women were cavorting about in the bowl of the pipe, kneeling, stretching cat-like. And then, of course, the scene culminates in a female-filled column of smoke emanating from the bowl of the pipe. Oh my, the seductive power of imagery, smoke-filled, admitted, but potent. And such an obsession with image, as opposed to substance, Mahatma Gandhi many years ago warned us that it can lead to business without morality, politics without principle, science without humanity, pleasure without conscience, wealth without work, knowledge without character, and most importantly to us, worship without sacrifice. When T.S. Eliot wrote, "Teach us to care and not care," what he seemed to be saying was that we should care terribly about what we can do in the world, hurl ourselves into it with as much intellectual and spiritual courage we can muster, but then we should not care about the reward. T.S. Eliot reminds us that we make a living by what we get, but we indeed make a life by what we give, giving as goodness. And as St. Paul has said, the most important test of any human activity is love. Though I understand all mysteries and all knowledge and have not love, I am nothing. Though I bestow all my goods and feed the poor and have not love, it profiteth me nothing. And it's through love, of course, that we share ourselves with others, and together we celebrate the incandescent light of human spirit. And we discover the desire to be good and the knowledge that only by being good can we become truly joyful. And together we can find those paths of heart, Lao Tzu's elucidation of the Tao, Buddha's eightfold path, Socrates' search for true wisdom, and Christ's seeking the kingdom of God within. Yes, it is together that we endure. It is together we help each other when we stumble, when we tire, or when we stop to weep. Yes, together we help each other when we stop to weep. Rabbi Kushner, author of the bestseller When Bad Things Happen to Good People, tells a lovely little story about a boy, a small boy, who had gone to the store for his mother and was rather late returning home. And his worried mother, when he finally did come home, his worried mother asked him, "What took you so long?" And he said that on his way home he came upon a small boy whose bicycle was broken. And I stopped to help him. And his puzzled mother said, "Well, what do you know about fixing bicycles?" And the little boy promptly replied, "Nothing. I just sat down and I cried with him." Well, such is the absolute power of empathy. And it is interesting, as we study the world's great religions, it is interesting that this empathy or this compassion, this goodness, is the central secular teaching of all of the world's great religions. Confucius was asked by one of his disciples, "Is there one word that sums up the basis of all good conduct?" And Confucius thought for a moment and then said, "Is not reciprocity that word? Is that not the basis of all good conduct? What you yourself do not desire, do not put before others." Or Buddhism, we find hatred is not diminished by hatred, and any time hatred is diminished by love. Or Judaism, do not unto others that which is hateful to you. And of course Christianity, therefore all things whatsoever ye would that others should do unto you, do ye even so unto them. But given today's difficult moral climate, I wonder, is such reciprocity, such compassion, such commitment to others, is it easy? No, it is not. And Robert Frost's great poem, Stopping by Woods on a Snowy Evening, I think represents a rather common dilemma of the individual who wants to indulge his or her own pleasures, but realizes critically that there are obligations that must be met and promises to keep. And I quote those familiar words, "These woods are lively, dark, and deep, but I have promises to keep and miles to go before I sleep, and miles to go before I sleep." A study recently conducted by Tankelevich, Skelly, and White, major pollsters, reveals that 63% of the North American public is ambivalent, at least. Should I not embrace a totally self-centered, self-fulfilled style of life? They say, on the other hand, the old standards of goodness are important. However, they found that 80% of those they polled said they were deeply affected by the new mentality, where they feel that their own needs for sensation, novelty, and ego fulfillment do take precedence over the needs of other people. But of course, you and I know that when the light of goodness shines, so then shines also our commitment to others. And one of my favorite writers, James Baldwin, has some rather poignant words to say about such a commitment. Baldwin writes, and I quote, "For nothing is fixed forever and ever. It is not fixed. The earth is always shifting. The light is always changing. The sea does not cease to grind down the rock. Generations do not cease to be born, and we are responsible for them, for they are the only witnesses we have. The sea rises, the light fails, lovers cling to each other, and the children cling to us. The moment we cease to hold each other, the moment we break faith with each other, the sea engulfs us and the light goes out. As Robert Frost suggests, a central part of goodness is struggling to create a world where promises are kept. And the great British poet W.H. Auden had created a beautiful stanza about commitment in his poem, The Shield of Achilles. In the old Shield of Achilles, it's in Homer's time, and there's a beautiful dancing space, and the athletes are at their games, and the children are playing with great abandon. But on the new Shield of Achilles, our time, there is nothing but a weed-choked field. And Auden writes, I quote, "A ragged urchin, aimless and alone, loitered about that vacancy. A bird flew up to safety from his well-aimed stone. That girls are raped and that two boys knife a third were axioms who had never heard of a world where promises are kept or where one could weep because another wept." But I would be remiss in closing if I did not mention the small but dynamic congregation of Bloomingdale United. In Bloomingdale United, there is enduring and abiding goodness that continues to grow within and without these walls of our small church. Your steadfast faith in goodness, I think, is revealed through the continued, even constant, and varied outreach projects to which this congregation dedicates itself. And as well, I think, in a world where goodness may be difficult to cultivate, that incandescent glow of your collective faith yet constantly struggles, most importantly, to dispel the world's darkness. So thank you for goodness' sake.